Tēnā rā tātou, tēnā rā tātou e te wānau kua piri mai, kua tata mai ki tō tātou wānanga a te pōnei, nō reira ka tukuna tētahi karakia mō tātou. Nō reira tēnei au te tauake nei taku tau. He tauranga tai, he tauranga auta, hua ki tai, e au moana, hua kiuta, e au enua, e au tipua, e au tauito, e au ora e hei. Turu turu o witi waka maua ki a tīna.
Tīna.
Au me ui e.
Tai.
Ai pie. Ka tira e te iwi, tēnei te mii kauake ki a koutou, tātou ngā kanohi ora o rātou kua uri ki te pō, nō reire tika ana ki a rere rā ngā mii. Ki e rao tātou kua riro ki te pō i te wāiti nei, nā rātou ki a rātou, hoiti anō rā ko tātou e nei ngā kanohi ora o rātou, nō reire mihi ana ki a tātou, nō reire tēnā rā tātou. So kia ora everyone. Good to I can see most of you on screen, so lovely that you've made time this evening to join us. So yeah, just welcome and really great that we can have a bit of a wānanga tonight. So this being our first, but I'll hand over to Mitch, so he's going to lay down some of our tikanga for our wānanga tonight and going forward, and then we'll get into our kōrero.
Tāpai, oe rere anga mi ki koutou rā ko piri mai ki a tata mai. Ki tēnei o ngā wānanga. So just to support what Jamie said, so this is our first series of Karakia Wānanga. As you would have seen in the pānui, the wānanga itself is aligned to the calendar that was sent out towards the end of last year, early this year. And the intent of the calendar was to provide a bit of kōrero for our ānau so that they have some kōrero in their kete for whenever they need. So in the calendar is 12 karakia, and each month we'll cover off those karakia. We'll predominantly do these wānanga in English, just to help everyone understand. Just in terms of house rules, if everyone can just ensure you keep your mic on mute. And if you've got any particular questions, just use the chat function. Just makes it easier to be able to manage. In terms of frequency of these wānanga, so you would have seen in the pānui the dates that we've identified, and those are the dates that we'll aim to stick to. So we've got 9 wānanga that will be going through to December. But that means that we've got a couple of catch-ups. So we've got the January, February and March that we just need to catch up on. So in these next three sessions, we'll do two karakia. So today's session will be around the January karakia, just to catch up on that one, and this month's karakia for April. We aim to have these for about 30-40 minutes. If it goes longer, then pai ana, but that's about the time frame that we're aiming for. We'll ensure that these are recorded, and we'll find an opportunity to be able to put them up on our YouTube page and then to be able to share out so that you as whānau can watch them again. Koera taku e wa?
Pai. Kia aro atu tātou ki ngā kōrero. So let's get into it. So we'll go to our first karakia. So this is January. So as Mitch said, it was deliberate that we didn't put translations against all of these they're kōrero really. Karakiatanga kōrero is how I would describe them. And you know, when all of the set of karakia really find their origins in a lot of our karakiatanga kōrero. So when you think about karakia from a Māori perspective, what you see is very much aligned to the natural environment, the natural world, or particular symbols that resonated with our tupuna and still resonate today. And so when we look at kohi tātia here, whiria matua te kaha I runga. And so, you know, just thinking about that. So we all know what whiri is, whiria te muka, so to plait, to braid, to weave together. And matua, you know, making that strong in this sense. I don't know if you understand kaha. So kaha, in terms of the root word, of course, means strength, but ka'a or ka'a are the lashings or bindings. So, you know, for a waka, we refer to, you know, when a waka is lashed, ko ngā au kaha o te waka, or a toki, you know, those lashings and how we bind a tuki, koera ngā kaaka, ngā aukaha. And so we see that in, you know, that whakataukitanga kōrero of Te Atiawa, you know, te tuki te tangatanga I te rā te pia. And when we talk about that, I mean, it's really speaking to the fact that, you know, if you don't lash a tuki or a waka tightly, that, you know, once the sun comes, it will loosen. And so when you think about that as a concept, you know, the importance in the old days of, you know, lashing, and that was really the predominant technology and sort of use, you know, in terms of flax as our key fibre. This particular kōrero was using that symbolism of kaha kaha to reinforce a particular message. And so when you think about that, you see a pattern in this particular kōrero. So whiria matua te kaha I runga. So we all know what I runga is. Whiria matua te kaha I raro. One of the formulaic sort of aspects of Karakia Māori is that there's this duality. So, you know, we've got here uta, tai. So uta meaning inland, tai, of course, you know, the ocean or the shore, runga, raro. So once you sort of start to study and look at Māori Karakia, you start to see how the sort of Māori mind or how our tupuna formulated particular Karakia and how they drew upon, you know, some of those natural elements, as I say, or some of those key symbols to reinforce a particular kaupapa. And so here, you know, the whole notion of whiria te kaha tua tini tini, whiria te kaha tua mano mano is a longer whakataukitanga kōrero that we see in a number of our waiata, a number of our karakia throughout Taranaki and the country. But again, you know, when you think about tua mano mano, you know, the multitude, the many, tua tini tini, again, the same. So what it speaks to is the importance of being united and bringing together those various strands of fibre to make strong. And so that's the context for this karakia. So it's whiria matua te kaha I runga, whiria matua te kaha I raro, whiria te kaha uta, whiria te kaha tai, whiria kia u, whiria kia mau. And so, you know, again, you're covering all bases here. So our tupuna, we're very much, you know, viewed things in a holistic sort of way. And so you're covering all your bases. So, you know, a similar karakia tanga kōrero you would hear is tuia ki runga, tuia ki raro, tuia ki roto, tuia ki waho, tuia te here tangata. So again, you know, this karakia is similar to that, but you're using the symbolism of binding, you know, those lashings or those fibres from above, below, sort of east, west, or inland out to sea, bringing together. So when you understand that context, what it's basically speaking to is, you know, through being united, bringing all of those aspects together, we're going to be much stronger, resolute, and resilient. And so, you know, it's a karakia, but it's also a call to action. It's also can be adopted as like a whakataukitanga kōrero. And so, you know, there's the standard sort of, so once you understand the context, how do I apply this? And of course, you know, when you think about opening a hui, an important hui, you know, this is on the money, especially if you're wanting to sort of bring, you know, different whakaaro together, or you're bringing people from different parts of an area or the country, because it also, you know, when we talk about runga, raro, uta, tai, we're talking about, you know, north, south, east, west. So we're talking about, you know, so bringing all of those elements together. And when we also talk about runga, raro, uta, tai, we're also bringing together runga when we think about ranginui. You know, ranginui, although we can see the sky, you know, we can't, it's not physical. So it sort of also can reference those intangible elements of our natural world. When we talk about te kaha I raro, so that's very much speaks to those material elements. So those places, you know, those things that we can feel, touch. And then of course we've got uta, those elements or those energies or those aspects of the landscape. And then when we talk about tai, of course, you know, those elements of the ocean or seascape. And so, And, you know, when we're performing this karakia, we're asking for all of those, whether we're talking about runga raro uta tai as energy, or whether we're talking about them as elements or people, or whakaaro as well, because when we think about, you know, the whakaaro we provide, it's calling upon all of those elements that we can draw them close and hold them tight. And so, you know, that's the context. So once you sort of understand that, I mean, you know, you can actually, I'd love to go around the room and say, okay, how do you apply that in context? So definitely use it to open up a hui. You can actually use it to close a hui as well. But when you think about it in the context, if you're doing a whai kōrero, this as a formula to, you know, welcome people that, it's a bit like that statement when we say ngā hau e whā, hara mai, you know, ngā hau o uta, ngā hau o tai, hau o runga, hau o raro. Again, it can be used to sort of, you know, welcome people into a space. So we sort of kick off with that. Mitch, do you have anything to add?
I suppose when I look at the word whiria, assuming everyone on the kōrero is aware of our particular mita, but we see the use of whiri or uri in words like wiri. So to be able to choose, to be able to select, we also see it in words like ko wiringa, to elect. But what I really like about this one is that it's about binding us to a particular kaupapa, binding us to a particular purpose, binding different groups of people who at times may have differing views, but bringing them together for one particular cause to be able to achieve a particular outcome on behalf of an iwi, for example. I also like the use of uta and tai in this particular one, and it's reference to the environment. So as Jamie mentioned, the landscape and the seascape. So when I think of ways to be able to apply this karakia, any particular kaupapa in relation to the environment, that's a positive kaupapa, that's a collaborative kaupapa, that's about bringing people together to be able to achieve a particular purpose for our taiao. This one really stands out for me. And just like how it uses whiri and being able to bring a whole group of different people with differing views behind one particular kaupapa. We see the use of the word kaha, which is, as Jamie mentioned, and I see Glenn's on there, but in terms of our mahi toi, so the use of ka'a as a taura, but a particular taura with a particular purpose. So in reference to our tuki, when we see the binding of tuki, that in particular is quite an interesting concept in itself, in that there's three parts to a tuki. You got the kakau, you got the mata, you got the kaha. Each of those have a different purpose, but once you bring them all together, they create a new purpose, and they have a new ability to be able to achieve something completely different as to what each individual item can achieve. So it's only together that they're able to achieve its full purpose. So I really like the use of kaha in that. Runga and raro, and I've heard Jamie and Hemi mention this before and heard others mention it. When we think of runga, we think of above. When we think of raro, we think of below. So we think of the sky, we think of the earth. Another way to consider runga and raro is as yourself, as an individual. So when we think of runga, it's everything from the shoulders up. So it's the knowledge, it's the experience that you need in order to achieve something. Everything from those shoulders down is then the labor required, the physical skills required in order to enact it, in order to achieve what it is that you're hoping to achieve. So I like that use of runga and raro and uta and tai. And for me, I really like this karakia because it resonates with our particular he momo waka way. So we have a particular saying for us in Ngāti Mutunga, and we have it on our logo, we have it on our branding. We use it on one of the names of our entities. So our community trust is called Te Uiringa. We have the saying, whiria te tangata, whiria te whenua, whiria ngā taonga tuku iho. So I like this karakia because it really resonates with that particular kōrero for us as an iwi.
Ka pai, mi tara, he pātai e kōrero, o he whakaroa e tahi, so anyone got anything else to contribute, or any particular pātai? You know, the key thing here, when you look at a lot of our wakatauki and our kōrero, you know, again, just there's all of these sort of examples and references to muka and harakeke and all of those sorts of things. We've got the other set kōrero about, you know, ki te kotahi, te kākoho, ka wati, ki te kāpuia, e kore e wati. So that whole, you know, when you look back at a lot of the kōrero and whakawai, it's very much speaks to that whole objective to unite or bring people together or bring kaupapa together. And so Wayne's just asked the pātai here around the origins of this karakia. So a number of the karakia in the calendar are excerpts of larger karakia or ruruku. Some of them are multiple pages. And this is a stanza in a particular karakia, which you see in a lot of our traditional Taranaki karakia references to a piece where it's either got wiria te kahatua tini tini, wiria te kahatua mano mano, or wiria te matua te kahirunga, wiria matua te kahiraro. So you see this stanza in a lot of traditional karakia, and it's also in a number of our poi during the time of parihaka. So again, you see the same reference here. And then we've got another pātai here from Rangi Mōkai around, you know, applying this karakia before weaving, definitely. Because when you think about, you know, the practice of weaving, and again, because it's the physical aspect, but also thinking about, you know, the karakia is about weaving people, weaving kaupapa, you know, bringing together sort of common perspectives and you know, a core purpose. So pai, wiria matua te kahirunga, wiria matua te kahiraro, wiria te kauta, wiria te kahatai, wiria kiau mau, turu turu o, witi waka maua kia tīna, au me ui e. Or, you know, wiria kia mau e hai. You don't even have to say turu turu o, witi, you can just say e hai at the end. Or, you know, you can do it as a little pau, as a little waiata, something short and sweet, you know, after a kōrero, or wahine mai, you can sort of sing this as you introduce yourself and then sort of get into your pepeha, or use it as like a tauparapara or a wakapuakitanga kōrero. Again, you know, this can be your mihi, and then you say, you know, wiria kiau mau, ko taranaki te maunga, ko urenui te waituku ngā kiri, you know, ko Ngāti Mutunga te iwi. Yeah, and taki poi. So a lot of these, this karakia is part of poi that have links to Ngāti Mutunga and other waiata of Ngāti Mutunga. So in terms of this formula. And when we go to the next karakia, that's I'll talk a bit about that in terms of its origins. Yeah, so he pātai anō, māma tēnei. So it's I love this because, you know, once you understand the symbolism and the imagery, and you get the context, and so how you apply it to different situations. So the big thing is always think about context. So any karakia, any waiata, any particular wakataukitanga kōrero, really important to understand sort of the context around some of the symbolism and the meaning. Ka pai?
The karakia itself is quite a versatile one, isn't it, Jamie?
Yeah.
In most situations, you could possibly use it. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily use it for kai. You wouldn't necessarily use it in terms of a mate. But if you understand what it's referring to, you'll find a real good opportunity to be able to or utilise it within your everyday practice.
Yeah, I love this as just because, you know, especially more ngā kaupapa ora, it's beautiful, you know, when you're mihiing to people on the marae. Nō reira, e te iwi, huria matua te kahirunga, huria matua te kahiraro, huria te kauta, huria te kahatai, huria kiau, huria kia mau, kia kotai o tātou wakaro, kia, yeah, and then you can sort of build off it. Ka pai. So haere tonu. I know we're all avid listeners to Te Korimako o Taranaki, so it was Te Pohi Campbell who had the show Pupuke Te Hihiri, and now that's sort of being run by Rauru Broughton. And so again, I'll sort of speak to the context of this particular karakia, but it's sort of important to understand this in the context of, you know, all of our iwi, and certainly from a Māori perspective, we've got a particular view around how the world and how the natural environment and how we came to be and how we evolved as people. And this particular, I call it a stanza, or this particular section of a longer karakia, which has its origins from our Aotea waka. And so through the waha ātai, so waha ātai and a lot of these particular wakapapatanga kōrero are basically genealogical whakapapa of how the world came to be from our perspective. And so this is part of a longer karakia which talks about te orokohanga mai o te ao. And so, you know, you have the sort of short sort of versions which talk about, you know, mai te kore ki te pō ki te ao marama. Is sort of a simple sort of cycle that is quite well known. And so, but this, as I say, is part of a longer karakia or whakapapa, which speaks about from a Aotea Taranaki perspective, how the world came to be. But this particular part of the karakia, because the earlier parts go through the various stages of te kore, the various stages of night, and then it comes to a point where it says ki te pō i oti atu ki te pō, and then that transition from night, it then comes into matua te pupuke, matua te hihiri, matua nuku, matua rangi, matua ki te waka tupua, matua ki te waka tawhito, tupua nuku, tupua rangi. And so again, you see this sort of use of matua. And so, you know, matua is used, it's quite common in traditionally in a lot of our kōrero. And so in a lot of our karakia, we have reference to matuaiwi. And so when we think about what does matuaiwi mean, it means sort of prominent or strong again. It's sort of emphasizing those particular aspects. But what I love about this particular karakia, again, it's relevant to us today. And it speaks about that whole thought process. So, you know, matua te pupuke. So we understand what pupuke is. So pupuke, the root word of pupuke is when something wells up or swells. And so when you think about this in the context of we've just gone through, you know, te kore, we've gone through various stages of night. The one thing about the whole Māori worldview is that our tupuna, and as we today, everything has potential. So even within te kore, although it's sort of the void, the nothingness, there's always this view that from te kore will come something, you know, it has the potential to be something more. And so from there it becomes the night. And then from the night, we come into this sort of, this period of evolution or formation of consciousness. And that's what really this speaks to. It's matua te pupuke. So you've got this welling up of thought, matua te hihiri. Hihiri, there are two sort of definitions, if you like, of hihiri. Hihiri means energy. So, you know, when you think about you're getting this welling up of thought, then you're starting to get this sort of energy start to form. Hihiri also means desire. So, you know, energy and desire. So, you know, once you get the sort of thought, the welling up of thought, you're getting this sort of energy start to form, this desire. And then you're getting, you know, matua nuku, matua rangi. And so again, when we think about matua nuku, so we know papa tuanuku, we know again matua rangi, rangi nui, and as Mitch was sort of indicating earlier, when we think about, you know, papa tuanuku in terms of how she is formed and her role and how she sustains us and that relationship that we have with her. And then we can also look at it in the context of course, the role that Ranginui has with us in terms of, you know, his place. And so when you think about this in the context of we're getting this sort of welling up of thought and understanding or consciousness, this energy, desire, we're then starting to see the formation of the tangible sort of world we're living in. So papa tuanuku, also the sort of formation of Ranginui. And then we've got matua ki te waka tupua, matua ki te waka tawhito. So again, you know, whānau, we're seeing this duality again. So in a lot of our karakia, a lot of our waiata, you'll see references to tupua and tawhito. And we see this in Taranaki because the older names for Pauakai and Kaitake ranges are Rua Tupua, Rua Tawhito. And so these are sort of these universal sort of concepts that we have. And so when you think about tupua, you know, tupua again, this is speaking to sort of growth. And yeah, it's talking to growth, whaka tupua, so something evolving and growing. And when you think matua ki te whaka tawhito, tawhito in this sort of sense is really talking about time, right? So at a basic level, you know, when we talk about, you know, kei konei ngā tupua me ngā tawhito, we use that a lot, you know. The tupua are those exemplars, those amazing sort of people, or the ancient, and then we talk about tawhito being those ancients, the ancient folk that are examples or exemplars for us. But if we come back to the context of this karakia, it's talking about that sort of formation of growth and development. And then we've got tupuanuku, tupuarangi. And so when you think about that, so we've got this sort of welling up of thought, matua te pupuke, matua te hihiri, so this desire, this energy, matua nuku, matua rangi, then we have the sort of the sort of creation of earth and of the heavens, matua ki te whaka tupua, matua ki te whaka tawhito, and then we're saying, you know, it's sort of that growth and development is occurring, and it's actually happening from itself. And then we've got tupuanuku, tupuarangi. And so, you know, the earth has formed, the heavens have formed. So that's the sort of literal sort of translation of it. And now I'm going to hand over to Mitch to sort of light it up with some context and how you apply it, Mitch.
I suppose just in addition to that, I've seen this one in another karakia that starts off wakarongo mai, ki te iringa e kake ai tāne nui ārangi. Pupu ki te hihiri, pupu ki te mahara, pupu ki te wānanga nui o te kore. Matua te pupu ke matua te hihiri, matua anuku, matua ārangi, matua ki te waka tupua, matua ki te waka tawhito, tupu anuku, tupu ārangi.
Yeah.
And when I was showing that particular karakia, the image that was sort of built in my mind was if we imagine the time when Rangi and Papa were still together. So as Jamie said, this is it's an example of a thought process.
Yeah. So
if we consider Tane's thought process at a particular point in time when he was still within the pool, and a little creek appeared, a beam of light shone through into their world. So for them, their world was just the poor. They knew nothing else. They only knew that world. But when this little creek of light came through into their world, his mind started to think. So he started to pupuke te hihiri, pupuketa mahara, pupuketa wānanga. So the desire about what's beyond that. There must be something more. There's more than what we know. And so matua pupuketa hihiri, pupuketa mahara, then starting to consider what could that be? What could be beyond our world? Pupuketa wānanga, then starting to well up and think, consider, could it be this? Could it be that? Could it be something else? And koera te wānanga o te pō, so that was his considerations, that was his wānanga that he had in the darkness. But that wānanga within him helped him to believe that there was more potential than what they already knew. And then moving into this permanence, this more prominence of pupuke and this more prominence of hihiri. So not just welling up, but this huge desire really starting to well up within him, and a desire to actually want to take action, not just think about there's something more, but take action and to be able to do something to try and realize some of that potential. Then pupuke te hihiri, or matua te hihiri, given that desire a lot more prominence, so that the action or words really turn into physical action, and then starting to get everyone together and have this wānanga about there's more than what we know. How do we start to discover that? And of course, we know what that led to. That led to the separation of rangi and papa. And from there, we then have the heavens and the earth, te ao hurihuri, the world that we now know and the world that we now embrace. But for me, what I really like about that particular karakia and even these references is that it provides us with an example of a thought process, an example that we can follow, an example that our tupuna followed, an example that our atua followed. So we have all of these examples, we have these role models that can help us to find the right path forward, that can help us to overcome a lot of the challenges and the barriers that come between us and our ability to achieve our goals and aspirations. And so that's what I really like about these particular type of karakia. It gives us that inspiration to be able to achieve our potential.
And that's really probably, when we think about karakia, because that's what karakia are, right? They're, from a Māori standpoint, they're there to inspire. But when you look at a karakia like this, I mean, they're markers of our ways of being and knowing. And so what they provide is that sort of window back to the examples of, this one of that separation of rangi and papa, but as a process for us to utilize and adopt for our purposes today. And that's the beauty of it. But, just as Mitch was saying, there's a number of examples throughout Māoridom and Taranaki around these, the sort of growth cycle. We've got the, te pū, te weu, te aka, te tāmore, which is the sort of, the growth and development of roots and a rākau, as an example. We've got te kukune, te pupuke, te hihiri, te rapunga, te whāinga. So there's all of these, but again, there are frameworks around how we can, thought processes and how we work through things. And so for this one, it's actually, as Mitch has sort of pointed out, it's a short form of a part of that separation of rangi and papa. But when you think about that origin story of the separation of rangi and papa, again, it's this fact that there's always potential. And so what it reminds us of is that to be ambitious, to have a desire to reach for more, that we've got more potential to gain. And then it sort of speaks to us around, matua nuku, matua rangi, matua ki te waka tupua, ki te waka tawhito, tupua nuku, tupua rangi. All of that speaks to how we utilize those sort of natural elements of the world or the tools that we have to realize some of that potential. And that's, again, it's one of those foundational whakaaro of our tupuna, is that, they had this belief that the cycle it's a bit like, you know, the kōrero from Te Witi o Rongongai, ko te pō te kaihari te rā, ko te mate te kaihari te ora. And, you know, that in simple terms, we know that a seed must die for a new shoot to emerge. And that's just the cycle of life, right? And so that's that mentality, that mindset, that attitude that our, well, it's just our way of being and knowing, right? So it's, and again, recapturing that. So how might we apply this, Mitch?
Yeah, again, this is quite a versatile karakia as well, similar to the other. But the way that I like to use this is if there's any particular hui where you need to make decisions, if there's any particular wānanga that you're entering into, where you need to consider a particular kaupapa. This is a real good example of, like I was saying, of that thought process required to be able to achieve a particular outcome. So if there's any situations that you find yourself in where you do need to have a kōrero with others, to understand differing points of views, but to come together, similar to how we're talking about wiria te kaa, to be able to come together to be able to achieve a particular goal. I think that's really useful for that particular kind of kaupapa. In school, I think this is in anything around learning would be a fantastic opportunity to use this karakia. Definitely.
Yeah. So context again, whānau. So, you know, so it's an easy one to remember, because if you think about the separation story of Rangi and Papa, that was all about new opportunity, new potential, about realizing that. And then when you look at some of the root words again, you know, pupuke, welling up, hihiri, desire and energy, nuku and rangi, which we know, around, you know, the sort of physical and metaphysical elements, or, you know, you can liken nuku to be, you know, the physical stuff, and rangi spiritual. That's another way, that's another sort of way that people look at nuku and rangi. And then, you know, matua ki te waka tupua, matua ki te waka tawhito. So that reminds us that, you know, we are part of a continuum, and that there are those that have gone before us that are examples for us, you know, and part of the reason why we are still here is as a consequence of those of our tupuna that have gone before us. And then what I love, tupua nuku, tupuarangi, that's that whole growth, and, you know, there's still more to go. Which is cool, because, you know, that again is a mindset that we, especially for our kids and for our whānau, that, you know, we should always be shooting a bit higher.
Yeah, and I like the way that you guys have explained it before, Jamie, around waka tupua and waka tawhito, about this ancient form of knowledge.
Yeah.
But we see the use of tupua in other karakia, like in tēnei te ara. Yeah. So those who are familiar with that, I mean, that's all about the pathway of excellence, and then the examples, the role models that we have in our history and our narratives that have laid the pathway for us to follow. So, o tēnei tupua, so tupua around that extraordinary knowledge, extraordinary skills and experience that Jamie was referring to. And tupua, I like to refer to people like, or individuals like Maui, who just had extraordinary skill above anyone else. So te aroa tēnei tupua, te aroa tēnei ariki. So again, we have ariki in our wakapapa that had to plan their trips, had to overcome adversity in order to find Aotearoa and to arrive at Aotearoa, to then be able to establish a community, to then eventuate down into us, ngā uri. Tēnei ariki o tēnei matua iwi. So Jamie mentioned matua iwi before. So I mean, there's I've heard a couple of translations or variations of the word matua iwi. I've heard it as the eponymous ancestor, so the matua of the iwi. So if we use that in the context of Ngāti Mutunga, of course, our eponymous ancestor is Mutunga. So we could refer to him as a matua iwi. I've also heard Hemi explain it as those whānau who create the backbone for the iwi, and that continue to have the ahi kā burning. So those who are really the whānau that are identified as real strong leaders within the community, and that continue to stoke that fire for all of those who are away. And also heard it as just the main body of an iwi. So thinking of the kōrero around Motunui, Jamie, and the kōrero the hunu that was sent out. And the intention of the hunu was then to be able to entice the major group to then come back to the matua, which was the main body of the iwi who were waiting to then be able to continue that battle. But those are ways that I've heard matua iwi being used. But again, these are examples that are in our narratives, examples that are in our whakapapa, that are in our stories.
Yeah, ka pai. Yeah, pai te rā, Mitch. So, like, if you see, ko mutunga te tupuna matua iwi. That's a good saying that was written in a lot of our old kōrero. Nō reira, ko mutunga te tupuna matua iwi. Yeah, lovely. He pātai? This is a beautiful karakia too. There's just a lot of symbolism, it's
And again, the purpose of these karakia wasn't to provide the entire part, but just to provide some real relevant components within a karakia, or snippets within a karakia that's digestible, easy to understand. If you can create the imagery within your mind, you'll find that it sticks a lot easier. Ka u ki tō ngāka, you'll find that you're able to hold on to it a lot easier. You're able to recite it, you're able to recall it. So that's something that always helps me, is if I can see the pictures within my mind about the karakia, that's how I tend to remember and recite karakia myself.
Me au hoki. That's what I do. It's always, once you can see the image and the picture. We've got a friendly crowd here. We've got a question here from Rangi Mōkai. So this is part of a this is in a number of karakia. So there are long versions which have probably 20 verses, part of Te Wahātai, but then this segment again is seen in a lot of our karakia within Taranaki, or variants of it. It's one of those sort of universal karakia, or universal sort of stanzas, because again, it's that whole foundational sort of worldview and perspective. But there are variants where you've got matua te pupuke, matua te maha, matua te mahara, matua te hihiri, etc. And then, he pātai anō kei konei mitara, ko tō tupuna tēnā, nō reira.
I mean, references to particular karakia like this, yeah. I mean, that particular pātere is all about locating us on our landscape. But again, it uses nice symbology, nice imagery, and even the duality that Jamie speaks of. But we find that a lot of our waiata, even some of our, I'll say newer karakia, but using historical kupu and historical text, historical frames to then create that. But yeah, kia ora.
But again, I think, just remember, whānau, like karakia is all about intention. And you can have intention once you understand. And that's why, I'm really big, as Mitch said, having a long karakia to learn, but having something that is clear and you can understand and that you can connect and relate to, is actually, in my view, or in our view, much more useful and purposeful. And that's why, we've got some beautiful short karakia like this that just, aha koe iti te kupu, hohunu te whakaaro. Yeah.
So of course, this is only the first wānanga of 9 that we're going to hold this year, and they're just meant for just nice chunk size kōrero. So not being able to keep you online for over an hour, but just that 30, 40 minutes just to have a discussion, to be able to provide you with some context and understanding around these karakia, so that you have some understanding to then ensure that you have the right intention, as Jamie mentioned. It comes off our strategic plan, of course, around our ability to want to share more kōrero with our āno. So this is one of a series of a number of kaupapa that you'll start to see us roll out over these next 12 to 24 months. Hopefully everybody's got the calendar and you're able to follow along and you do have that hanging up. If not, just send an email or ring through to the office. We can sort something out.
Ko mutu ngā kōrero mo te pōnei. Nō reire, mihi ana kia koutou, mihi ana kia tātou. Ko te tūmanako ia, he pai he nei kai te pōnei, mo te hine ngaro me te ngākau, hua no he wā anō ka ui anō rā tātou ki te wā aere he nei kōrero, hua no e mihi ana kia koutou, mihi ana kia tātou. Mau pia e whakakapi tō tātou Wānanga Mitch.
Ka pai. Oi atu rāti o te kōrero o te tuakana nā, te toko mi atu rā ki koutou, ko ono mai, ko piri mai, ki tēnei o ngā wānanga o te pū. Nō reira, ka aka kape ake. O ka rongo mai ki te ringa kake aia tāne nui ārangi. Pūpoke te iri, pūpoke ta māara, pūpoke ta wānanga nui te kore. Matua te pūpoke, matua te iri, matua anuku, matua ārangi, matua ki tō katupua, matua ki tō katauito, tupu anuku, tupu ārangi, e rungu e o ki ake kironga, tō turu aka maua kia tīna, hui e,
taiki.
Pomari.
Uru tātou.